So now we want to talk a little bit about like terms. So what are like terms? Well, terms are separated by a plus or a minus, and like means there's something the same about them. So what is it? Well, let's look at 5 plus 2. These are just two numbers, and we know that we can add numbers as our whole numbers and integers. We can add them together, and 5 plus 2 is simply 7. So that's no problem. Well, what if I have 4 apples and then I get 5 more apples? Well, they're all apples, so I can add those together, and I end up with 9 apples. Okay, so nothing scary there, nothing unusual, but what if I have 5 apples and 8 chairs? If I add those together, do I get AppleChairs? ChairApples? I don't think so. We still just have 5 apples and 8 chairs. We cannot add them together because they are not the same. In other words, they are not like. So when we're talking about algebra, letters work very much the same way. You can only add those that are like. So here we have an x plus x. Now one thing that I want to point out here is when you don't see a number in front of a letter, it doesn't mean there's not one there. There is in fact a 1 that is in front of each of those x's, but we never see it because it's always understood or implied to be there. So we can add 1x plus 1x just like we added apples. They're both the same, so how many x's do we have? Well, we have 2x. How about this? X plus y. Are x and y the same? Well, of course they're not. So we can't add those together. We still have just x and y because they are not like terms. So the key point to remember is that if we want to add terms together, they must have the same letter. Let's have a look at this one. We have 5a plus 7b minus 3a. Well, these two terms, 5a and negative 3a, they're both the same. It's like the apples. They both have an a, so those are considered to be like terms. The thing to remember is don't forget about the sign that is directly in front. This 5 is understood to be positive. If there's no sign there, it's always positive. Then we are adding 7, so this sign goes with the term that is directly after it, so 7b is positive. And this negative has to stay with the 3a that comes directly after it. So we can go ahead and collect our like terms. That means add or subtract. So think about 5a minus 3a. Remember when we added our apples together, 4 apples and 5 apples? It's the same thing with the a's. If I have 5 a's and I take 3 a's away, I'm left with simply 2 a's. Now this 7b, he's the only term that has a b. He is not like any other term, so we have to keep him just as he is. And this is as simple as you can make this. Well, let's talk a little bit about multiplication. It's only slightly different, but remember, multiplication is repeated addition. So if I have this term, 5 times a, that tells me that I have 5 groups of a. So I have a plus a plus a plus a plus a. I add a 5 times. Here I have x times 6. Now how do I know it's a multiplication? Well, in anything here, you don't see a sign. And if there is no mathematical operation shown, it is understood to be multiplication. So this would actually give you x6, and you're never going to see it written that way. So the proper way, or the way in which you will always see it, is going to be 6x. Now these mean the same thing, but it's just a matter of form. This is how you will always see it written. 7 times 8f. Now the 7 doesn't have an f, but that's okay because we're talking about 7 groups of 8f. So that means I have 8f plus 8f plus 8f plus 8f plus 8f plus 8f plus 8f. 7 times. So if we were to add those all up, 8 plus 8 7 times is the same thing as saying 7 times 8, which is 56, and we still have our F. Now, there's no sign in between there. That's indicative of multiplication. So when are like terms useful? Well, we've talked about expressions, and when you have to simplify, you're going to need to simplify using these rules about like terms. And that will eventually become very important when we're solving equations and we have to figure out what that letter actually is. So they can be very useful, and with a little practice, it's not going to be any trouble at all. And that's our lesson on like terms.